The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Westlake High School's music room as Minji Park slipped quietly into the back row. She was 15 minutes early to class, just as she'd planned. Being new meant unwanted attention, and Minji had spent her first week in America perfecting the art of becoming invisible. She pulled out her notebook and kept her eyes down as other students began to file in. 16 was a terrible age to move across the world, especially when you didn't want to. 3 months ago, she had been in Seoul, surrounded by friends and the familiar rhythm of her life. Now she was just the quiet Asian girl who barely spoke in class. "Good morning, everyone," Mrs. Harlow announced as she swept into the room, her voice cutting through the teenage chatter like a knife. "Settle down immediately." The music teacher was tall and thin with perfect posture and a perpetual look of mild disappointment. Her hair was pulled back so tightly that Minji wondered if it gave her headaches. Mrs. Harlow was known for her strict standards and for producing students who regularly earned scholarships to music schools. "Today, we're discussing your semester assessments," Mrs. Harlow said, writing on the whiteboard in elegant script. "Each of you will perform a classical piece of appropriate difficulty on December 12th. A collective groan rose from the students. "Your selection must demonstrate technical skill and emotional interpretation," Mrs. Harlow continued, ignoring their protest. "I expect each of you to challenge yourselves." Minji sank lower in her seat. She had hoped to avoid performing altogether. Back home, a piano performance had meant something entirely different. "I'll be meeting with each of you individually to approve your selections," Mrs. Harlow said, checking her watch. "For now, please open your textbooks to page 94. We're continuing our study of Romantic-era composers." As the lesson progressed, Minji took careful notes, her handwriting small and precise. She understood more than her limited English skills allowed her to express. Music theory, at least, was somewhat universal. "Minji," Mrs. Harlow called suddenly, causing her to jolt upright. "Since you're new to our class, perhaps you can tell us something about Chopin's influence on piano composition?" 26 pairs of eyes turned toward her. Minji felt heat creep up her neck. "Make piano speak like voice," she said carefully. "His music has singing quality." "Like conversation?" Mrs. Harlow raised an eyebrow. "That's correct. His cantabile style revolutionized how composers approached the instrument." "Well done." Minji nodded quickly and looked back down at her notebook. She hadn't meant to reveal that she knew anything at all about classical music. After class, students lined up to discuss their assessment pieces with Mrs. Harlow. Minji waited until almost everyone had left before approaching the teacher's desk. "Mrs. Harlow," she said softly, "I choose Chopin Prelude in E minor for assessment." The teacher looked up from her planner with a frown. "That's a beautiful piece, but it's far too simple for an 11th grade assessment. It's something I might assign to a 7th grader." "My English not good yet," Minji explained, the excuse ready on her lips. "I want to focus on words for my other classes. Simple piece better for me now." Mrs. Harlow studied her for a moment. "How long have you played piano, Minji?" "Little bit." "In school," she said with a shrug, avoiding eye contact. "Show me your hands, please." Minji hesitated, then reluctantly held out her hands, palms down. Mrs. Harlow took them gently, turning them over to examine her fingers. "These are a pianist's hands," she said, looking at Minji's long fingers and the slight calluses on their tips. "You have clearly played more than a little bit." Minji pulled her hands back and tucked them into her sweater sleeves. "I will not accept the Chopin Prelude," Mrs. Harlow said firmly. "You need something that will actually challenge you." She turned to her computer and scrolled through a document. "What about Liszt's La Campanella?" Minji's heart skipped a beat. La Campanella was one of the most technically demanding pieces in the piano repertoire. Its rapid jumps, trills, and complex fingering had challenged her for months when she'd learned it 2 years ago. "Too difficult," she protested quickly. "I cannot play." "Nonsense. I can see you have the technical foundation. This will be good for you," Mrs. Harlow said, writing the piece down in her assessment log, "and it will help you connect with the class. Everyone appreciates good music regardless of language barriers. Please." "Mrs. Harlow, different piece," Minji tried again, panic rising in her chest. "Minji, part of education is pushing beyond your comfort zone. I'm assigning La Campanella. I'll give you access to the practice rooms whenever you need them." The teacher's tone made it clear the discussion was over. You have 6 weeks to prepare. That should be plenty of time. As Minji turned to leave, she noticed a small group of students by the door who had overheard the conversation. Did she just give the new girl La Campanella? One boy whispered. That's insane. Jack tried to play that last year and crashed so badly he almost transferred schools. She'll never pull it off, a girl with curly hair replied. Poor thing probably doesn't even know what she's in for. Minji hurried past them, clutching her books to her chest. This was exactly what she didn't want: attention, expectations, and the weight of others' eyes on her when she played. That evening, Minji sat at the modest upright piano in the corner of their small apartment. Her parents were still at work. Her father at his new engineering job that had brought them to this country. Her mother at the convenience store where she'd found part-time work. She ran her fingers lightly over the keys without pressing them down. This piano was nothing like the gleaming Steinway she'd practiced on for 4 hours. Every day back in Seoul, this one had a slightly sticky E-flat key and went out of tune in humid weather. Minji took out her phone and found a recording of La Campanella. The familiar notes filled the quiet apartment, delicate, bell-like tones dancing above thunderous runs that spanned the keyboard. She closed her eyes, her fingers instinctively twitching with the memory of the movements. 2 years ago, she had performed this piece at Seoul Arts Center with the Korea Symphony Orchestra. The national newspaper had called her a once-in-a-generation talent and Korea's answer to Lang Lang. 6 months after that performance, everything had fallen apart. She stopped the recording and stared at the piano. She could play La Campanella perfectly. That wasn't the problem. The problem was that playing it meant becoming visible again. The next day after school, Minji slipped into practice room 3, the smallest and most isolated of the school's practice spaces. She'd discovered it during her first week while exploring the music wing. Unlike the other rooms, this one was tucked away at the end of a hallway, partially hidden behind a supply closet. She placed her backpack on the floor and sat at the piano, an old Yamaha upright that had seen better days but was still in decent tune. For several minutes she just sat there, her hands hovering over the keys. Then slowly she began to play scales. C major, G major, D major. She moved through all 12 keys, her fingers remembering their old discipline. She played them at half speed, then normal speed, then twice as fast until her hands were blurring across the keyboard. When she finished, the silence in the small room felt heavy. Minji took a deep breath and placed her hands in position for La Campanella. Just as she was about to play the first note, the door opened. Mr. Coleman, the school janitor, stood in the doorway with a surprised expression. He was an older man with kind eyes and gray hair that stuck out in all directions. Sorry to disturb you, he said. Just checking rooms. Didn't know anyone was in here. Is okay, Minji said, quickly standing up. I go now. No need to leave on my account, Mr. Coleman said. You practicing for Mrs. Harlow's assessment? Minji nodded reluctantly. What piece did she give you? La Campanella, Minji replied softly. Mr. Coleman whistled. That's a tough one. She must think highly of you, Minji shrugged. She not know me? The janitor smiled. Well, this old piano's not the greatest, but I keep it in better shape than the others. Used to play a bit myself back in the day. Jazz mostly. He took a step back. Practice as long as you need. I'll make sure nobody bothers you. After he left, Minji sat back down at the piano. There was something about the janitor's gentle manner that made her feel a little more at ease. She positioned her hands again and began to play. At first she played mechanically, her fingers remembering the patterns while her mind remained detached. But as the music continued, something inside her began to stir. By the time she reached the middle section, she was no longer thinking about Mrs. Harlow or the assessment or being the new girl. She was just playing. Her fingers danced across the keys, muscle memory taking over as the familiar notes poured out. The small room filled with sound, delicate arpeggios, thundering bass notes, and the bell-like melody that gave the piece its name. When she finished, Minji was breathing hard, as if she'd been running. She hadn't played like that since before the incident in Seoul. For a moment, she felt a ghost of the joy that music had once given her. Then she remembered where she was and why she was here. America was supposed to be her fresh start, her chance to be normal, to be invisible, to forget. She closed the piano lid and gathered her things. 6 weeks until the assessment. 6 weeks to figure out how to play one of the most difficult piano pieces ever written. without revealing who she really was. As she left the practice room, Minji didn't notice Mr. Coleman standing in the shadow of the supply closet, a look of astonishment on his face after what he had just heard. The secret practice sessions became Minji's daily routine. Every afternoon, while other students rushed to sports practice or headed home, she would slip into practice room 3. Mr. Coleman always made sure it was available for her, sometimes even leaving a bottle of water or an apple by the piano. "You need energy to play like that," he'd told her with a wink when she'd thanked him for the first snack. Today marked 3 weeks since Mrs. Harlow had assigned La Campanella, and Minji was practicing the trickiest section, a series of rapid hand-crossing jumps that even professional pianists found challenging. "That doesn't sound like someone struggling with a difficult piece," came a voice from the doorway. Minji's hands froze above the keys. Mr. Coleman stood there, his mop forgotten in his hands. "How long you listen?" Minji asked, her cheeks burning. "Long enough to know you've been holding out on Mrs. Harlow," he said, stepping into the room and closing the door. "Where did you learn to play like that?" Minji stared at the black and white keys, debating how much to reveal. Something about the janitor's kind eyes made her want to trust him. "Seoul National University of Arts," she finally said. "I studied there since I was 7. Mr. Coleman's eyebrows shot up. "That's like the Juilliard of Korea, isn't it?" Minji nodded. "So why are you pretending you can barely play? That Liszt piece. You could perform it tomorrow if you wanted to." Minji closed the piano lid and folded her hands in her lap. "I not want to be known for piano anymore." Mr. Coleman leaned his mop against the wall and pulled over a chair. "Mind if I ask why?" The question hung in the air between them. Minji hadn't talked about it with anyone outside her family, but keeping everything bottled up was getting harder each day. Last year, big competition in Seoul. Very important people watching. I play Rachmaninoff Concerto No. 3. Her voice grew quieter. Middle of performance, I freeze, cannot move fingers, cannot breathe. Everyone waiting. Cameras recording. I run off stage. "Stage fright," Mr. Coleman nodded. "Happens to the best of us." "Not just stage fright," Minji shook her head. "Doctors call it panic disorder. After that, every time I try to perform, same thing happen. Heart race, cannot breathe, feel like dying." She looked up at him. "I practice 8 hours every day since I was little girl. Piano was everything. Then suddenly I cannot play in front of people. My teachers, my sponsors, everyone give up on me." "So your family moved here for a fresh start?" "My father get job offer. My parents think maybe new country helped me forget piano, be normal teenager." She gave a small, sad smile. "But how you forget something that is part of you for so long?" Mr. Coleman nodded thoughtfully. "I understand that. I played jazz for 20 years. Had a regular gig at a club in New Orleans before moving here. Music gets in your blood. You still play? Not professionally. But for myself? Every day," he pointed to his heart. "Some things you don't do for an audience. You do them because they're part of who you are." Minji considered his words. She'd never thought about playing just for herself. Since she was 7, every note had been scrutinized by teachers, judges, critics. Music had always been about achievement, about being the best. "Mrs. Harlow will know," Minji said. "When I play at assessment, she will know I lie." "Maybe that's not such a bad thing," Mr. Coleman suggested. "Mrs. Harlow can be tough, but she cares about her students. She might understand more than you think." "Please don't tell her," Minji pleaded. "I want to decide when people know." "Your secret's safe with me," Mr. Coleman promised. "But think about what I said. Playing for yourself might be the first step to healing whatever broke inside you that day in Seoul." After he left, Minji opened the piano again. For the first time in months, she played whatever came to mind. Not to practice, not to impress, just to feel the music. It felt like taking a deep breath after being underwater too long. The next day, Minji arrived at music class to find the room buzzing with excitement. "Did you hear?" a boy named Luis asked as she took her seat. "We're having a guest today. Some big-shot pianist from New York." Minji felt her stomach tighten. Before she could ask more, Mrs. Harlow swept in, followed by a tall man in a tailored suit. "Class, I'd like to introduce Dr. Richard Chen, concert pianist and professor at Manhattan School of Music. He's here to give a master class to our advanced students, but he's kindly agreed to perform for all of you first." Dr. Chen smiled at the class. "Thank you for having me. Before I play, I'd love to hear what pieces you're working on for your assessments." Students began calling out their selections. mostly Beethoven sonatas and Bach preludes. Mrs. Harlow pointed to different students, having them stand and name their pieces. And you? Dr. Chen asked, looking directly at Minji. La Campanella, she said quietly. Dr. Chen's eyebrows rose. Ambitious. That's one of Liszt's most technically demanding works. I'd love to hear how you're approaching it. Oh, Minji is new, Mrs. Harlow explained quickly. She's still working through the basics. Minji felt a flicker of indignation. The basics? She'd mastered the basics before she was 10. Well, I look forward to hearing everyone at the winter concert, Dr. Chen said. Now I'll play a little something for you. He sat at the grand piano at the front of the room and launched into Chopin's Revolutionary Etude. His technique was flawless, his interpretation passionate. The class watched in awe, but Minji found herself noticing small details. His slightly rushed phrasing in the middle section, the way he leaned too heavily on the pedal during the coda. When he finished, the class erupted in applause. Dr. Chen bowed modestly. Any questions before I continue with the master class? He asked. I have question, Minji said before she could stop herself. Everyone turned to look at her. Yes? Dr. Chen smiled encouragingly. In middle section, why you choose to rush tempo instead of letting melody breathe. A hush fell over the classroom. Mrs. Harlow looked mortified. Minji, she hissed. That's inappropriate. But Dr. Chen held up his hand. No, it's a valid question. He looked at Minji with new interest. You have a good ear. Most people wouldn't catch that. I took that section faster because I'm emphasizing the revolutionary spirit of the piece, the urgency, the call to action. But you're right, it does compress the melodic line. How would you approach it? All eyes were on Minji. She swallowed hard. I would let left hand drive rhythm while right hand float above like voice singing over marching feet. Dr. Chen nodded slowly. That's a very mature interpretation. Would you mind demonstrating? Minji felt the familiar tightness in her chest. Play in front of everyone? She couldn't. But as she looked around, she saw curiosity on her classmates' faces, not judgment. And this wasn't a competition or a formal recital. It was just a classroom. Just that section, Dr. Chen added gently, seeming to sense her hesitation. Slowly, Minji stood and walked to the piano. She sat down, positioned her hands, and took a deep breath. She played just the middle section of the etude, letting the melody sing above the driving bass line, just as she'd described. When she finished, she kept her eyes on the keys, afraid to look up. That was beautiful, Dr. Chen said quietly. Your touch is remarkable. Who did you study with before coming here? Minji hesitated, then decided on a partial truth. I had lessons in Korea. Well, whoever taught you did an excellent job with your foundation. You have a gift. As Minji returned to her seat, she noticed the changed looks on her classmates' faces. The secret was partially out now. She wasn't just the quiet new girl anymore. After class, Mrs. Harlow asked her to stay behind. Minji, why didn't you tell me you played at such an advanced level? She asked, her voice more gentle than Minji had ever heard it. I not want special attention, Minji replied. Dr. Chen was very impressed with you. He wants to include you in the master class this afternoon. Minji shook her head quickly. No, please. I'm not ready. Mrs. Harlow studied her for a moment. There's more to this story, isn't there? Minji looked down at her hands. You don't have to tell me now, Mrs. Harlow said. But I want you to know that my classroom is a safe place to make mistakes, to learn, to grow. Music isn't just about perfect performances. In Korea, it was only about perfect, Minji said softly. Mrs. Harlow nodded. That explains a lot. Well, you're in America now, and in my class, we value growth over perfection. She handed Minji a pass. The master class is optional for you. Think about it. Minji took the pass and left, her mind swirling. In one short day, her carefully constructed anonymity had begun to crumble. Part of her was terrified, but another part, a part she hadn't heard from in a long time, felt something like relief. That afternoon, she found herself standing outside the door of the recital hall, where the master class was being held. Through the small window, she could see Dr. Chen working with Luis on a Beethoven sonata. You going in? Minji turned to find Mr. Coleman nearby organizing his cleaning cart. I don't know, she admitted. Sometimes the hardest part is just opening the door, he said. Whatever you decide, I'll be rooting for you. Minji took a deep breath, her hand on the door handle. The old Minji from Seoul would have walked in confidently, ready to show everyone her talent. The new Minji wanted to run and hide. Maybe there was a middle path, one where she could reconnect with music without the crushing pressure of perfection. Maybe here, in this new country, she could find a new relationship with the piano. She pushed the door open and stepped inside. The recital hall fell quiet as Minji slipped through the door. Dr. Chen paused his instruction to Luis, and several students turned to look at her. Mrs. Harlow, sitting in the back row, gave a small encouraging nod. "Ah, Minji," Dr. Chen said with a warm smile. "I'm glad you decided to join us. Please take a seat." Minji quickly found an empty chair in the last row, trying to ignore the curious glances from her classmates. Luis continued his lesson, working through a difficult passage in his Beethoven sonata. Dr. Chen was patient but demanding, asking him to repeat certain sections until the phrasing improved. "Music isn't just about playing the right notes," Dr. Chen explained to the group. "It's about telling a story."
"What is your sonata saying, Luis?"
As the master class continued, Minji found herself leaning forward, absorbing every word. Dr. Chen's approach was so different from her teachers in Seoul, who had focused almost exclusively on technical perfection. He talked about emotion, about connection, about finding your own voice within the composer's framework. After working with 3 students, Dr. Chen checked his watch. "We have time for one more. Minji, would you be willing to play a little of your list for us?" Minji felt her heart race. Every instinct told her to refuse, to run, to protect herself from the possibility of another panic attack. But something about being in this room, with this particular teacher, felt different from the high-pressure world she'd left behind. "Just a small section," Dr. Chen added gently, seeming to sense her hesitation. "Perhaps the opening?" Slowly, Minji stood and made her way to the grand piano at the center of the room. It was a beautiful instrument, far better than the upright she'd been practicing on. She sat down, adjusted the bench, and placed her hands on the keys. "Take your time," Dr. Chen said. "We're all just here to learn together." Minji closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Then, before the fear could take hold, she began to play. The opening of La Campanella flowed from her fingers, delicate bell-like tones dancing above a steady left hand. She played just the first page, focusing on the music rather than the people watching her. When she finished, she kept her eyes on the keys, waiting for the critique. "Beautiful tone," Dr. Chen said after a moment. "You have a remarkable touch, Minji. Very controlled, yet expressive." He walked closer to the piano. "May I ask where you studied before coming here?" The question hung in the air. Minji glanced at Mrs. Harlow, who gave her an encouraging nod. "Seoul National University of Arts," Minji admitted quietly. "I studied there from age 7 until we move here." A murmur ran through the small audience. SNUA was world-renowned for its music program, particularly for nurturing young prodigies. "That explains your technique." Dr. Chen nodded. "And who was your teacher there?" "Professor Kim Sunja," Minji said, the name still bringing a mixture of respect and anxiety. Dr. Chen's eyebrows shot up. "Professor Kim? She rarely takes students so young. He must be very talented." He turned to the class. "Professor Kim has produced 3 Van Cliburn competition winners in the past decade." Minji shifted uncomfortably on the bench. She didn't want to talk about competitions. "Let's work on this section," Dr. Chen said, seeming to sense her discomfort. He pointed to a particularly challenging passage. "The difficulty here is maintaining the bell-like quality while executing the jumps." "What approach did Professor Kim suggest?" "She say to imagine finger as hammer-striking bell," Minji explained, demonstrating with her right hand. "Quick attack, then immediate release to let sound ring." "Excellent imagery," Dr. Chen nodded. "Would you play that section again with that in mind?" Minji played the passage, focusing on the crisp, clear tone of each note. "Perfect," Dr. Chen smiled. "Now let's talk about the emotional quality." Liszt was inspired by Paganini's violin playing when he wrote this. How might we capture that virtuosic, almost playful spirit? For the next 15 minutes, Minji forgot about her anxiety as she worked with Dr. Chen. He was insightful and kind, offering suggestions rather than commands. By the end of their session, she had gained new perspectives on a piece she thought she already knew completely. "Thank you, Minji," Dr. Chen said as they finished. "You have a rare gift. I hope you'll continue to develop it." As the class ended and students began to leave, Dr. Chen approached Minji again. Mrs. Harlow mentioned you only recently arrived from Korea, he said. May I ask why you left SNUA? Students usually stay through their high school years. Minji looked down at her hands. I had problem. With performing. Stage fright? Dr. Chen asked gently. Worse, Minji admitted. Panic attack. During important competition? I couldn't breathe, couldn't move fingers. I run off stage. Her voice dropped to a whisper. After that, it happened every time I try to perform. Doctors say I have anxiety disorder. Dr. Chen nodded thoughtfully. I've seen it happen to gifted young musicians before. The pressure can be overwhelming, especially in the competitive atmosphere of places like Senue. My parents think Fresh Start in America would help, Minji continued. They say I don't have to play piano anymore if I don't want to. And do you want to? The question caught Minji off guard. No one had asked her that before. I don't know, she said honestly. Playing make me happy, but performing make me terrified now. Those are two separate things, Dr. Chen pointed out. Playing for your own joy and playing for an audience. Perhaps you need to rediscover the first before attempting the second. Minji considered this. How? Play what you love when you want to for no one but yourself. Find the joy again before worrying about the pressure. He reached into his pocket and handed her a business card. I'm giving a recital at Boston Symphony Hall next month. I'd like to invite you and your parents as my guests. No pressure, just a chance to experience music as a listener. Minji took the card, surprised by the gesture. And if you ever want to talk more about managing performance anxiety, please call me. I work with many students who struggle with similar issues. After Dr. Chen left, Mrs. Harlow approached Minji. I owe you an apology, she said. I pushed you without understanding your background or your struggles. Is okay, Minji said. You not know. Well, I know now, Mrs. Harlow said with a small smile. And I want you to know that your assessment grade doesn't depend on a perfect performance. I'm more interested in seeing your growth and your interpretation. As Minji walked home that afternoon, her mind was spinning. In one day, her carefully guarded secret had unraveled. People knew who she was now, or at least who she had been. But instead of the judgment or pressure she'd feared, she'd found understanding and support. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. Working late tonight. Dinner in fridge. Love you. Minji sent a quick reply, then changed direction. Instead of going home to an empty apartment, she headed back toward school. The music building would still be open for another hour, and she suddenly felt an urge to play. Not to practice for the assessment, but simply to play for herself. When she arrived at practice room 3, she found a note taped to the door in Mr. Coleman's handwriting. Tuned the piano today. Thought you might want a proper instrument for your practicing. Your biggest fan. Minji smiled as she entered the small room. She sat at the piano, which did indeed sound better than before, and began to play. Not Liszt or Rachmaninoff or any of the competition pieces she'd drilled for years, but a simple Korean folk song her grandmother had taught her when she was very young. The melody was sweet and melancholy, telling the story of a bird that flies across the ocean to find its home. Minji hadn't played it in years. Professor Kim had discouraged simple music once she'd advanced to the international competition circuit. But now the familiar tune brought tears to her eyes as her fingers remembered the way. When she finished, she heard soft applause from the doorway. Mrs. Harlow stood there, her eyes also damp. That was beautiful, the teacher said. What is it called? Nuarirang, Minji replied. It's Korean folk song about finding your way home. Mrs. Harlow nodded. Sometimes we find home in unexpected places. She hesitated, then added, I've been thinking about your assessment. Instead of La Campanella, would you consider playing something that has personal meaning to you? Perhaps this piece? Minji considered the suggestion. Playing Nu Arirang wouldn't be technically impressive, but it would be honest. And after months of hiding, the idea of sharing something true felt strangely appealing. I think about it, she promised. As Mrs. Harlow left, Minji turned back to the piano. For the first time since the disaster in Seoul, she felt a small spark of excitement about playing for others. Not to impress them or to win their approval, but to share something genuine. She began to play again, this time a piece she'd started composing back in Korea but had never finished. The melody had been locked inside her, waiting for the right moment to emerge. Now in this small practice room thousands of miles from where she'd begun, Minji felt the music flowing again. Maybe Dr. Chen was right. Maybe she needed to rediscover the joy before facing the fear. And maybe this new school, with its kind janitor and its stern but caring teacher, was exactly where that journey could begin. As the last notes of her composition faded, Minji made a decision. For her assessment, she would play 3 pieces: La Campanella to show who she had been, Nuari Rang to honor where she came from, and her own composition to express who she might become. It was time to stop hiding. The news spread quickly through Westlake High School. By lunchtime the next day, Minji could feel the difference in how people looked at her. Some students stared openly as she passed in the hallway. Others whispered behind their hands. A few from the music class approached her with questions about Korea and her training. "Is it true you've played with orchestras?" a girl from her English class asked as Minji sat alone at lunch. Minji nodded, picking at her food. "That's so cool," the girl said, sitting down across from her. "I'm Lily, by the way. I play violin, but nothing serious." "Nice to meet you," Minji replied, surprised by the friendly gesture. "Some of us are going to Dr. Chen's recital at Symphony Hall next month," Lily continued. "He gave Mrs. Harlow tickets for the music students. Will you come?" The invitation caught Minji off guard. She hadn't made any friends since arriving in America, partly because she'd been trying so hard to blend in and disappear. "Maybe," she said cautiously. "I think about it." That afternoon, Minji found herself once again in practice room 3, but this time she wasn't hiding. She was preparing. The assessment was just 3 weeks away and she had 3 pieces to perfect. La Campanella wasn't the challenge. She had performed it flawlessly dozens of times before the incident. Her own composition needed work, though. She had the melody and basic structure, but it still felt unfinished, like a story missing its final chapter. She was deep in concentration when a knock interrupted her. It was Mrs. Harlow. "Sorry to disturb you," the teacher said. "I wanted to give you this." She handed Minji a flash drive. "What is it?" Minji asked. "Videos of your performances in Korea," Mrs. Harlow replied. "I hope you don't mind, but after yesterday I was curious. I searched your name online and found quite a collection." Minji stared at the small drive in her hand. Her past, downloaded and condensed into a tiny piece of plastic. "There's one in particular I'd like you to watch," Mrs. Harlow said gently. "Not the competition where things went wrong, but an earlier one, when you were about 12. You were playing Chopin's Ballade No. 1. Minji remembered that performance. It was the young artist's competition in Seoul, her first major win, before the pressure had become too much, before music had transformed from joy to obligation. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I'll leave you to your practice," Mrs. Harlow said. "But Minji, you were magnificent. I want you to remember that." After Mrs. Harlow left, Minji continued to stare at the flash drive. Part of her wanted to throw it away, to keep the past firmly in the past. But another part, a stronger part, was curious. Who had she been before the fear took over? Could she find that person again? That evening, after dinner, Minji sat with her parents in their small living room. Her mother was mending a shirt while her father read the news on his tablet. They looked up in surprise when Minji cleared her throat. "I need to tell you something," she said in Korean, their home language. "About school." Her parents exchanged worried glances. "What is it?" her father asked, putting down his tablet. "Is everything okay?" "My music teacher assigned me a difficult piano piece for assessment," Minji began. Liszt's La Campanella. Her mother's needle paused mid-stitch. "But we agreed you would take a break from serious playing. I tried to tell her I couldn't play it," Minji continued. "But then there was a master class with a visiting pianist and they know now, about Snua, about Professor Kim, about everything." Her father took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. "Oh, Minji, are you okay? Did you have another attack?" Minji shook her head. "No, that's the strange thing. I played for them, not a full piece, just parts, but I didn't panic. It felt different here." "Different how?" her mother asked. Minji thought about it. "Less pressure. They don't expect me to be perfect. They just want me to play music." She looked up at her parents. I think I want to try performing again, for my assessment. Her parents shared another look, this one filled with cautious hope. Are you sure? Her father asked. We moved here so you could have a normal life, away from all that pressure. I know, Minji nodded, and I'm grateful. But I think music is part of my normal life. I just need to find a healthier way to share it. Her mother set aside her mending and came to sit beside Minji on the couch. What does your doctor say? Dr. Patel. Minji had been seeing a therapist since they'd moved to America, working through her anxiety. I have appointment tomorrow, Minji said. I will talk to her about it. If she thinks it's okay, then we support you, her father said firmly. We always have. There's something else, Minji added, pulling out the flash drive. Mrs. Harlow found videos of my old performances. She gave me this. Her parents fell silent, eyeing the flash drive like it might contain explosives. Would you watch one with me? Minji asked softly. The Chopin ballad from the Young Artist competition? They gathered around her father's laptop, huddled together on the couch. As the video began to play, Minji felt a strange sense of disconnect. The girl on the screen, with her perfect posture and serious expression, seemed like a stranger. She was wearing a blue dress that Minji still had hanging in her closet, unworn since coming to America. The young Minji in the video played with technical brilliance, but what struck present-day Minji most was the joy visible beneath the concentration. Even with all the pressure, 12-year-old Minji had still found happiness in the music itself. When the video ended, Minji was surprised to find tears on her cheeks. Her mother squeezed her hand. You were so happy then, she said softly. I was, Minji agreed, before it all became about winning and being the best. Perhaps that's the difference, her father suggested. In Korea, you were training to be a concert pianist. Here, you can just be Minji who loves to play piano. The distinction felt important. Minji had never separated her identity from her achievements before. In Korea, she had been Minji Park, piano prodigy. Here, she could just be herself, a girl who happened to play piano beautifully. The next day after school, Minji met with Dr. Patel, her therapist. The office was warm and comfortable, with soft chairs and plants in every corner. So you played in front of your class, Dr. Patel said after Minji explained what had happened. And you didn't experience a panic attack. That's wonderful progress, Minji. It felt different, Minji tried to explain. Like less weight on my shoulders. That makes sense. Dr. Patel nodded. The context has changed. In Korea, your performances were tied to your entire future, to your identity. Here, it's just one aspect of who you are. I want to play my assessment, Minji said. 3 pieces. But I'm still scared the panic might come back. Dr. Patel leaned forward. It might. I can't promise it won't. But we've been working on techniques to manage your anxiety. And now you know that even if it does happen, it's not the end of the world. It doesn't define you. They spent the rest of the session practicing breathing techniques and visualization exercises. By the end, Minji felt more confident about her decision. Take small steps, Dr. Patel advised as their time ended. Perhaps play for a few friends before the big assessment. Build up gradually. Minji took this advice to heart. The next day, she invited Lily to join her in the practice room during lunch. Would you listen to something I'm working on? Minji asked. I need practice playing for other people. Sure, Lily agreed enthusiastically. I'd love to hear you play. Minji sat at the piano and played Nu Arirang, the Korean folk song. It was simple compared to the virtuosic pieces she'd performed in competitions, but it carried emotional weight that technical showpieces often lacked. When she finished, Lily was quiet for a moment. That was beautiful, she finally said. What does the song mean? It's about journey, Minji explained, about leaving home but carrying it in your heart. Play something else? Lily asked. Minji hesitated, then launched into La Campanella. Her fingers flew across the keys, executing the difficult jumps and trills with precision born of thousands of hours of practice. She was halfway through when she noticed that a small crowd had gathered at the practice room door, students and teachers drawn by the virtuosic music echoing down the hallway. For a brief moment, panic fluttered in her chest. Too many eyes watching. Too many expectations. But she focused on Dr. Patel's techniques. Deep breath. Focus on the music. Stay in the moment. The panic receded, and she finished the piece with a flourish. The small audience burst into applause. Minji looked up, surprised to see Mr. Coleman at the back of the group, beaming with pride. "That was incredible," Lily breathed. "I had no idea anyone could play like that in real life." "Thank you," Minji said, feeling a strange mixture of embarrassment and pride. It had been so long since she'd accepted praise for her playing. As the crowd dispersed, Mrs. Harlow stepped into the room. "Well done," she said simply. "How did it feel?" Minji thought about it. "Scary, but also good, like finding old friend again." Mrs. Harlow smiled. "That's exactly what it is. Now what about your third piece for the assessment? Your original composition?" "Still working on it," Minji admitted. "It's not finished. May I hear what you have so far?" Minji nodded and began to play. The piece started softly, hesitantly, like someone testing their footing on uncertain ground. It gradually built in complexity and confidence, incorporating elements of both classical Western music and traditional Korean melodies. But as she approached the end, the music became uncertain again, searching for resolution. "I don't know how to finish it," Minji explained as her fingers stilled on the keys. "I think you do," Mrs. Harlow said. "You just haven't lived it yet." Minji looked up confused. "Music tells stories," Mrs. Harlow explained. "Your composition is telling your story from where you've been to where you are now. The ending will come when you decide what happens next in your journey." As Minji walked home that afternoon, she thought about Mrs. Harlow's words. Her composition was unfinished because her story was unfinished. The assessment wasn't just about playing 3 pieces. It was about deciding who she wanted to be going forward. The girl who ran from the stage in Seoul? The prodigy who pushed herself to the breaking point? Or someone new? Someone who played with joy and shared her gift without letting it consume her? For the first time in over a year, Minji felt excitement rather than dread when she thought about performing. The assessment was no longer a test to be feared but an opportunity to rewrite her story, and she was finally ready to do just that. The day of the assessment arrived with a gentle snowfall, the first of the season. Minji stood at her bedroom window, watching the white flakes drift down onto the street below. In Korea, snow had always meant canceled lessons and rare free days. Here it felt like a clean page, a fresh start. Her blue dress, the one from the Young Artist competition video, lay on her bed. She hadn't worn it since coming to America, but today felt right, not to reclaim the past but to acknowledge it as part of her journey. Minji's phone buzzed with a text from Lily. "Good luck today. We're all excited to hear you play." Over the past 3 weeks, Minji had gradually opened up to her classmates. She'd joined Lily and a few others for lunch, helped Luis with difficult passages in his Beethoven sonata, and even attended a school basketball game. Small steps toward a normal teenage life, something she'd never had in Korea. "Minji, breakfast," her mother called from the kitchen. She found both her parents waiting. A special breakfast of seaweed soup and rice laid out on the table, the traditional Korean birthday meal, though it wasn't her birthday. "For good luck," her mother explained with a smile, "like new beginning." "We are very proud of you," her father added, squeezing her shoulder. "No matter what happens today." Minji felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you," she said softly. After breakfast, her father drove her to school, the piano pieces running through her mind. La Campanella was polished to perfection. New Arirang felt like a warm embrace, comfortable and true. But her original composition still troubled her. She had worked on it every day, yet the ending continued to elude her. "Maybe you're thinking too much," her father suggested as they neared the school. "Your mother always says that when I overthink a problem at work, I should step away and let the solution find me." Minji considered this. "But the assessment is today. No more time to step away." Her father pulled up in front of the school and turned to face her. "Minji, music has always come from your heart, not just your head. Trust yourself today." She hugged him tightly before getting out of the car. Will you and Mom be here this afternoon? Front row, he promised. Dr. Patel, too, she asked if she could come. The school day passed in a blur. Minji could hardly focus on her classes, her mind repeatedly returning to the 3 pieces she would play that afternoon. By the time lunch arrived, her nerves were stretched tight. You look like you might throw up, Lily observed as they sat in the cafeteria. Are you okay? Just nervous, Minji admitted. About the music? Because you sound amazing. I've heard you practicing. Minji shook her head. Not the music itself, the performing, being watched. Lily considered this. When I get nervous before violin recitals, my teacher tells me to find one friendly face in the audience and play just for them. Ignore everyone else. It was simple advice, but it resonated with Minji. In Korea, she had always played for the judges, for her teachers, for the critics, never for someone who simply cared about her. After lunch, Minji went to practice room 3-1 last time. Not to practice, she'd done enough of that, but to center herself in the space where her American musical journey had begun. Mr. Coleman was there, polishing the small upright piano. Wanted it to look its best for your last practice, he explained with a smile. Though I hear you'll be using the grand piano in the recital hall this afternoon. Yes, Minji nodded. But this one is special to me, Mr. Coleman beamed. Will you play something on it? One last time? Minji sat down and without thinking began to play a simple piece she'd learned as a child, a Korean lullaby her grandmother had sung to her. The melody was sweet and uncomplicated, with none of the technical challenges of her assessment pieces. Yet something about its simplicity felt perfect in this moment. When she finished, Mr. Coleman wiped a tear from his eye. That's what it's all about, isn't it? Not the fancy stuff, but the music that speaks straight to the heart. Minji realized he was right. In her years of training, she'd sometimes lost sight of that fundamental truth. Music wasn't about impressing people. It was about moving them. Thank you, Mr. Coleman, she said sincerely. For everything. He waved her thanks away. Just doing my job. Now go show them what music really means. The assessment was scheduled for 3:30 in the school's recital hall. By 3:15, the room was nearly full, not just with music students and teachers, but with parents and other students who had heard about the piano prodigy from Korea. Minji peeked through the curtain and felt her heart race at the sight of so many people. Dr. Patel had warned her that the larger audience might trigger her anxiety. They had practiced visualization techniques, breathing exercises, and positive affirmations to use if panic began to rise. Minji closed her eyes and took a deep breath. I am more than my performance, she whispered to herself. Music is a gift I share, not a test I must pass. Mrs. Harlow appeared beside her. Are you ready? Minji nodded. I think so. Remember, this isn't Seoul, Mrs. Harlow said gently. Everyone out there is on your side. Minji looked out at the audience again, this time noticing her parents in the front row, just as her father had promised. Next to them sat Dr. Patel, and behind them Mr. Coleman in his janitor's uniform, looking slightly out of place but entirely proud. We'll start in 5 minutes, Mrs. Harlow said. You'll be our final performer. The minutes ticked by as other students performed their assessment pieces. Some played beautifully, others nervously missed notes or rushed tempos, but Mrs. Harlow received each performance with the same respectful attention and constructive feedback. Finally, it was Minji's turn. Mrs. Harlow stepped to the center of the stage. For our final performance today, we have a special treat. Minji Park will play 3 pieces. Liszt's La Campanella, a Korean folk song called New Arirang, and an original composition. Minji joined us just a few months ago from Seoul, where she studied at the prestigious National University of Arts. A murmur ran through the audience. Mrs. Harlow raised her hand for quiet. What makes Minji's performance particularly meaningful is not just her extraordinary talent, but her courage in sharing it with us today. Please welcome Minji Park. The audience applauded as Minji walked onto the stage. She wore her blue dress and her hair was tied back neatly, just as it had been for countless performances in Korea. But this time, as she bowed to the audience, she allowed herself a small smile, something the old Minji would never have done. She sat at the grand piano, adjusted the bench and placed her hands on the keys. For a moment, the familiar fear crept in, the tightening in her chest, the slight tremor in her fingers. But then she found her father's eyes in the front row and her mother's encouraging smile beside him. She remembered Lily's advice: find one friendly face and play for them. Minji began with La Campanella. Her fingers moved with practiced precision through the challenging runs and jumps. The piece had once been a vehicle to showcase her technical mastery, to prove she belonged among the elite young pianists of Asia. Now, it served a different purpose, connecting her past to her present, acknowledging the years of discipline and dedication that had shaped her as a musician. When the final notes faded, the audience erupted in applause. Some even stood, amazed by the technical brilliance they had just witnessed. Minji bowed slightly, then remained seated, waiting for the room to quiet again. Her second piece, Nu Arirang, offered a stark contrast to Liszt's pyrotechnics. The folk melody was simple but profound, telling a story of journey and home that mirrored Minji's own experience. As she played, she thought of Korea, its mountains and temples, its busy streets and quiet courtyards. The place that had shaped her for better and worse. The audience was silent when she finished, moved by the emotional depth of the piece. Minji took a deep breath, knowing that her greatest challenge still lay ahead. My final piece is something I composed myself, she said softly, speaking directly to the audience for the first time. It's called Finding My Voice, and it's about my journey. She placed her hands on the keys and began to play. The composition started hesitantly, with a recurring motif that suggested questions, searching. As it progressed, it incorporated elements from both her other pieces, the virtuosic runs from La Campanella and the heartfelt melody from Nu Arirang. The middle section built in confidence and complexity, telling the story of her growth. And then she reached the part where she had always stopped before, unsure how to conclude. For a terrifying moment, her mind went blank. But as she looked out at the faces watching her, her parents, her new friends, her teachers, the ending suddenly became clear. The music resolved not with a dramatic flourish or a technically brilliant passage, but with a simple, clear melody that combined elements of both her Korean heritage and her new American experience. It was neither sad nor triumphant, but peaceful, the sound of someone who had found her place in the world. When the final note faded, Minji kept her hands on the keys, tears streaming down her cheeks. The hall remained silent for a long moment and then erupted in applause. Her parents were on their feet, her mother openly crying. Lily and the other music students cheered. Even Mrs. Harlow was wiping away a tear. Minji stood and bowed deeply, the way she had been taught in Korea. But then she did something she had never done before. She smiled broadly at the audience, letting them see her joy. As the applause continued, Mrs. Harlow joined her on stage. That was extraordinary. Minji, she said, her voice thick with emotion, I don't even have words for the gift you've given us today. Minji bowed again, this time to her teacher. Thank you for helping me find my music again. After the assessment, the recital hall buzzed with excitement. Students and parents crowded around Minji, offering congratulations. Dr. Chen, who had returned for the assessments, spoke with her parents about summer music programs that took a more balanced approach to nurturing young talent. The conservatory path isn't the only option, he told them. There are programs that focus on the whole musician, mind, body, and spirit. As the crowd began to thin, Minji found Mr. Coleman standing quietly at the back of the hall. You found your ending, he said with a smile. Minji nodded. I stopped thinking and just played what I felt. That's when the best music happens, he agreed. You know, in my jazz days, we had a saying, if you're thinking, you're stinking. Real music comes from somewhere deeper than thoughts. Will you play for me sometime? Minji asked. Your jazz music? Mr. Coleman looked surprised, then pleased. I'd like that. Maybe we could even play together. Jazz and classical, they're not as different as people think. As Minji left the recital hall with her parents, she felt lighter than she had in years. The panic hadn't come. The fear hadn't won. She had played her music, not perfectly perhaps, but honestly. And that, she was beginning to understand, was what mattered most. What now? Her father asked as they walked to the car. Minji considered the question. The old Minji would have immediately focused on the next competition, the next challenge to conquer, but the person she was becoming had different priorities. Now, she said with a smile, I think I'd like to go for ice cream with my parents. And tomorrow, maybe I'll start teaching Lily some Korean folk songs on the piano. And next week, I might join the school jazz band. Mr. Coleman says they need a pianist. Her mother laughed. That sounds like a very good plan. As they drove away from the school, Minji looked back at the building where she had found her voice again. She didn't know exactly what her future held, whether music would be her profession or simply her passion. But for the first time in a long time, she was excited to find out. The reluctant virtuoso had finally embraced both the music and the musician. And in doing so, she had found her way home.